Let's talk about Mexico. So you may recall, you remember last week when we had the Americas Summit, the Summit of the Americas, and the Mexican president said, I'm not going to go, right? Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, here he is. He said, I'm not going to go because he said in protest of the Biden's exclusion of Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela, we're not going to go. Because the United States wanted to lecture the rest of the world that, hey, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are not democratic enough. This is what we told. We told them, right? So they're not coming. So now, Mexican president was asked in an interview about what's going on in Ukraine, and he's condemning the NATO approach to the war in Ukraine, labeling it, quote, immoral. So President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador at a press conference answering questions from reporters was not holding back. It was basically his sort of big second display of independence from Washington in recent days. So this is a reporter asking a question at the press conference here. So that is not Manuel, but he'll be up in a second, I believe. So last week he refused to attend the conference, and then he said, I believe we need a change in the policy that has been imposed for centuries, the exclusion, the desire to dominate, the lack of respect for the sovereignty of the countries, the independence of every country. Basically calling what we're doing in Ukraine as immoral. This idea that we're just going to funnel weapons, we're going to funnel money is totally immoral. And the AP has a breakdown of this.
Yes. So I think that there are a couple things you can break down from this, right? It is a bit ballsy because Mexico has typically not called out the United States for any foreign policy before. So it is indicative of someone feeling a bit more comfortable doing that, sort of the decline of America as a world power if someone is willing to say what they think. Although it is rich, right, to talk about weapons in Mexico, which is flooded with weapons as well. So I guess we can put that aside a bit. But he's talking about invasion in other nations. He did not mention the United States by name, but you can tell who he's talking about. He says, I'll supply the weapons, you supply the dead. This is immoral, right? When asked if he thought what he thought about the conflict, he says that the war in Ukraine could have been avoided. He says, of course it could, right? The United States and Western powers would not have you believe that. They would have you believe there was no choice, right? We had no, there was no other way to be. But here's someone who has governing experience who says you wouldn't have done it this way.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable to think that it's actually refreshing finally, like to hear from, like we've been bullying the Western Hemisphere since our creation.
Sure.
Right? That's what we do. We have the frickin' Monroe Doctrine. You want to laugh about this, right? The Monroe Doctrine, put into place by President James Monroe, right? The idea was that, hey, no Eastern power, it was really about Europe at the time. We didn't care much. There wasn't anything else to really care about, right? It was Europe was what was our focus. If you're a European, you better stay out of the West. You better stay out of the West. We don't want you here. We have Western power, and this is our hemisphere. You better stay out. Meanwhile, who are we to dictate to all of Central and Latin America and South America that we're the big daddy in the room?
Well, I guess what you could extrapolate here, or just quandary, is if Mexico becomes anti-NATO and there is a reason to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. Do you see where I'm going here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't even want to say it. I just want you to fill in the blanks. Like, will it be something where, that there are plenty of people already in South America who are anti-NATO. Can anti-American sentiment travel up through the Americans?
Yes.
And
yes,
will
yes,
it
yes,
be
yes.
something then that the United States actually does have to contend with, that it is not the popular kid in that neighborhood any longer?
It's already happening. So we're already seeing Brazil, having meetings with Iran over oil and other issues. So you're seeing Brazil meeting with Iran. You're seeing with other countries in Central America saying, Venezuela, for instance.
Yes.
Venezuela holding meetings with Iran. Sorry, I said Brazil. So you have Central and South American countries saying, maybe we want to align ourselves a little differently here.
When a New York Times reporter asked an Argentinian cyber arms dealer, "Do you only sell to NATO?" he was like, "What? Why would I limit myself that way?" And she goes, "Well, NATO is a benevolent power." And he was like, "You need to change your worldview, Nicole. Like this is not how people see it there, that NATO is sort of the white hat in the world." Philip, were you saying something and I interrupted you?
Oh, that's fine. I was going to say, did you see where Russia has created a new G8 that involves Brazil and China? And I'm not sure if Iran was in it. I only caught Brazil and China in it, but they're basically like forming their own G8 with some of these other countries.
Yeah. Why? When you look at the American hegemony, which is collapsing, right? They're hanging on to it as much as they can.
Yeah, it all feels very junior varsity at this moment.
And you're like, "Wow, man, we want to be with these guys? We want to be with these guys who have been at war for 250 years?" That's the United States. The United States has been at war in some way or another for 250 years of its 275-year history. And it's $30 trillion in debt. And we've bullied so many people now. Where, by the way, when we talked about money being, as we've pulled out of Afghanistan, and we go in there and we bomb those countries, but then we don't actually rebuild them or help people, right? So what does China do? They've actually been creating alliances in a lot of these areas and actually rebuilding the Middle East and investing in the Middle East. Bless you. And and building the Belt and Road Initiative, right, which is like aligning itself with parts of the Middle East, and through obviously into plans into Syria and otherwise. So again, where we are pulling back on our failures, there's other people who are ready to step up and take the lead. I kind of think back to. Let's think about Portugal, right? Portugal, go back to the 1400s, 1500s, and you had like this massive expansion of the Portuguese Empire, right? I mean, basically created the slave trade, right? I mean, basically it was like the dominant power of sea power in the world, right? And they had colonies all over the place, right? And just go into Zanzibar and taking Goa, all over the place. It was the Portuguese Empire, and then at some point they're like, "We're done." Like we're done with this, and the Portuguese are now happy to be neutral, mostly, and peaceful, third safest country in the world. And you're like, and when I hear from Portuguese who say, when the Americans like to say that we're the best country in the world, we're the biggest country in the world, we're the strongest country in the world, the Portuguese are like, we've been there, done that.
It comes at a great cost.
And it's not all it's cracked up to be. And so there's other world leaders now. There's other world powers that are stepping up to try to take that mantle from the United States.
I mean, really, that was only 500 years ago, right? And so these cycles of governments that maintain their power, the United States being only 250 years old, is it's conceivable that this cycle of popularity is nearing its end.
Meanwhile, even in the United States, people are fleeing, right? So it's amazing to watch. So you have the Mexican president standing up to President Biden and calling what the United States is doing in Ukraine immoral. And then you have so many Californians who are just so unhappy with California that they're fleeing to Mexico, and basically saying, "We want to get out. Our cost of living is through the roof. The violence." Imagine this. Did you ever think, Mexico, we hear about the violence in Mexico all the time. Californians are saying they feel like it's safer to go to Mexico than it is to be in California right
Yes,
now.
But they can create these little bubbles of privilege too, right? And so...
Yeah, they can take their California wealth.
Yes.
And instead of being taxed to the hilt, they can go to Mexico and create sort of a safety bubble. Maybe they even have armed guards, or they live in a gated community where, like they do in South Africa, where you literally have armed guards and barbed wire fences to protect yourself.
Yes. And so, well, I think what's interesting is to see these countries around America that are saying, like, we actually don't really want all of these Americans. They come in with their dollar and they inflate property prices and they drive prices up. They tip in a way that the locals cannot sustain, right? And so that in and of itself is interesting. But just to think about, America's attitude towards immigrants and now America's attitude as immigrants, or other countries' attitude about Americans. In fact, just last month, the Los Angeles Times ran this story about Portugal, saying, Portugal is saying, welcome, but not Californians. And this is,
Please go home.
Yeah, Californians, not you, right? Because there is this sort of, I'm a Californian, and this is the part where Clayton loves to dig at Californians because his wife is one and he's from Philadelphia and he thinks Californians are obnoxious. And so I am always the recipient of Californians don't know how to drive in the rain, which is true. Californians can't take cold weather. Californians, right? So
they ruined Portland.
Yeah, they ruined Idaho. They moved to Idaho. There's literally in Idaho now they have T-shirts that or
say,
the bumper stickers.
Build a wall to California because
Right.
they don't want
Stop
Californians
coming here.
exporting their values and also their sort of economic habits. I get it, right? But as a Californian, a native Californian who lives in Portugal, that hurts a little bit.
Well, you see it in Texas. I mean, you absolutely see what some of the stuff, the Californian baggage that they bring with them into Texas, and a lot of the woke politics, and certainly the case. So I think that Portugal article is interesting, basically saying, hey, no. I know it looks a lot like California in Portugal. Please go away. Please don't come. Please don't
They
come.
call it Europe's California because the climate is so similar and the food and the seafood and all of that stuff. It is very similar, but culturally it is not, right? And so bringing Californian dollars and Californian tipping habits and California, where do I get my argan oil? These are things that I think of myself.
God. You're digging yourself
It
a
is
hole.
literally I'm not exaggerating. In Portland, it's not so bad now but about 10 years ago, it was if you said you were from California, it was instant ostracization. People just looked at you funny. They're like get out, go back to where you came from, because they hated it. Because what was happening was people that were selling their houses in LA or San Francisco, then moving to Portland, they could get double the house for half the price, and so it was driving up housing prices in Portland,
Yes.
and that was just all people in Portland thought about. It was just kind of funny.
So it's just the
and
economic
mixing the two
habit,
drivers.
right? and we can't drive in the rain.
Yeah.
Is that it? Is there anything else that I should know
Nope, that was basically it. Was
Californians
just
about what you do.
that we do that's obnoxious? That's
Oh my God! Let us know in the chat. In the chat right
I'm
now.
opening myself up for
Yeah.
this one.
Are there any other things that
'Cause otherwise
Californians
I
are
think we're
obnoxious
kinda
about?
cool.
Let us know in the chat. Are there any things that Californians are obnoxious about?
Don't you wish they all could be Californian girls?
I know.
And to be fair, the chat should also talk about people from California in the chat should let us know what annoys them about everybody else.
Sure, right?
To be fair.
Drugs, Miguel says. Theft.
I don't do any of those things. That's really unfair.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Well, yeah. Please let us know.
Putting ranch dressing on pizza.
Your traffic stinks. Oh yeah, come on. I lived in Redondo Beach. I married a Californian. I worked my first job in television at a Fox affiliate when I was starting out in journalism was in Los Angeles. But yeah, and someone said the traffic.
Okay, there's our comment. Woke culture. Who just said
culture.
that? Well,
woke
okay.
culture. Yes, Hollywood.
I'll give you that one.
I mean, all you need to do is look at the latest Jurassic Park movie to see what's wrong with the world and to see what comes out of California. Sometimes you can get a good movie out of there, and sometimes you can't, or you get the wokeness of what's and that. I think this latest Jurassic Park movie that we went and saw this past week.
It wasn't woke. It was just not good. That there was nothing to do with wokeness. It just was a bad movie.
We could have a debate on that. Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. We've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.